Welcome to the Birth Journeys podcast. I'm your host, Kelly Hoff, BSN RN. I am a wife, a mother of two, and a nurse specializing in the care of women and newborns. In this podcast, we will share powerful journeys of birth givers with the goals of lifting the veil on the birth experience, healing through sharing, and beginning an open conversation to strengthen trust and promote transparency between birthing people and healthcare providers. Hello. Today I have with me Gina Mundy. Gina is the mother of three and an attorney that specializes in childbirth cases. For over 2 decades, she has analyzed the mistakes that are made during labor and delivery. Drawing on this knowledge, she has authored the book, A Parent's Guide to a Safer Childbirth, to help parents prevent these mistakes and have a healthy baby. Rather than merely getting involved after an unfortunate mistake was made, Gina has taken a proactive approach by getting involved before childbirth. Today, Gina will be sharing about her new book and giving tips on how parents can have a safer childbirth. Gina, welcome and thank you for joining me.
Kelly, thank you for having me. I got to tell your audience, we just had the best pre-show chat ever. You are amazing. So I am super excited to be here today.
Thank you. And I really enjoyed getting to know about what you're doing. I kind of feel like we're kindred spirits and kind of approaching this before birth time where parents can really take advantage of the knowledge that they can gain by truly preparing for childbirth so that they can enter the space confident and calm and really knowing what they can do and what choices they have.
Oh, yeah, 100%. I mean, it's such a big day.
Yeah.
It's a day most moms dream about their entire life, from when they're a little girl playing with their baby dolls. I know I played with my baby dolls and always thought of that big day. So it's important to be ready 100%.
Yeah. And I always think about how much planning goes into a wedding. And I wonder to myself, why are we not planning the birth as much as the wedding, but in the sense that we need to not necessarily plan like the twinkle lights and the lavender oil and all of this stuff, but really understanding all of the things that go into the birth and all of the options and how we feel about all of those things. You know, you would have an opinion of roses versus lilies, right? And you would know if you want them in your bouquet or not. But why aren't we looking into Pitocin versus a Cook's catheter or whatever it is and really learning what the pros and cons and when you might want to have those introduced to your birth and what circumstances would have to happen for that to be okay, and really working through our emotions on that situation.
Well, you are so right on. I love it. And I think in my book, I don't say wedding. I say, hey, you plan everything in life, vacations, financial plan, you name it. So why are we not doing it for the birth? And let me tell you, in my book, chapter 1, all of the lessons from the baby cases, whether it's a lesson from the family that was involved, whether it was from a delivery team or the medical experts on the case. These are the lessons that we can learn from the baby cases. And keep in mind, as a lesson, you're learning from it in order to prevent it from happening in the future. But lesson number 1, by far, is the most important lesson. And it is, from the families, you must prepare for childbirth. And you're going to be able to make better decisions when you're ready. And you're going to have that streamlined communication with your delivery team. There's so many different benefits to being ready for the big day. You know, the families, your audience understands what a childbirth case is. I did not know my profession existed until I got into it 21 years ago. So just so your audience understands, when I'm saying childbirth case, this involves a case that has to do with the birth of a baby. And baby is not born healthy. It's permanently not healthy. Something went wrong, a complication, a mistake. Sometimes baby may pass away during childbirth, and sometimes mom will pass away during childbirth. So these are what I have seen over 21 years. I mean, this is important stuff. So I can tell you, the families in this case, it's like they have like the mindset we're all guilty of. Bad things only happen to other people. And you don't prepare. You're already in a very vulnerable state of mind anyway, given childbirth and everything else. But it's just, it leaves you in a position where you can't make those good decisions. And let me tell you, in my cases, the families are one decision or minutes from a healthy baby. So having an understanding of what you're getting into, working with your delivery team, Yeah, by far the number one lesson you can learn from a childbirth case.
Yeah. And I feel like as a healthcare professional, I can tell when either the preparation hasn't occurred or the preparation occurred, but the emotions surrounding that haven't been addressed. And so then there's beliefs that will prevent that person or family from being able to make those decisions in an emergency situation. And I feel like even if things turn out okay, the trauma that occurs because of the lack of preparation or the lack of really exploring what comes up for you when you think about some of these interventions and getting clarity on that. Having not done that and not having a thorough understanding, that is what leads to trauma. And if it doesn't lead to a lawsuit because there's no adverse event, it certainly will lead to the patient complaining about their experience in the hospital. And so I feel like if we are able to get to the bottom of what makes people feel out of control in the labor and delivery space, we can all kind of come together and solve a lot of the problems that we're seeing come up with the patient satisfiers and also what may lead to those minutes that turned into a bad outcome. And I think it all comes down to communication and understanding each other. And I'm seeing this trend of healthcare professionals going into one corner and saying, I'm just trying to help you have a healthy baby, and doing things and communicating in ways that are somewhat manipulative in order to get the patient to do what they want. And then I see the patients resisting and becoming incredibly defensive and not being open and honest with their healthcare providers. And that really sets up the scene for nobody getting what they want. So if we're not working together as a team and we're both just trying to push the other person to get what we want instead of understanding how to come together, that is a huge reason I think that plays into the maternal mortality rate in this country and the neonatal mortality rate in this country. Because something is wrong. We have the top mortality rates for both maternal and neonatal deaths in the developed world, and it shouldn't be that way.
You know, Kelly, when I was hired into this field 21 years ago, literally my first case was February 2003. I was hired into a team of over 20 of us. That's all we did with these cases. Mm-hmm. So, you know, sometimes when I talk to somebody like you and I hear the doctor patient issues with doctors trying to do the right thing, patient's defensive, and then just not working together. It's just incredibly hard to hear. So my book is very work together with the team to make good decisions, because your delivery team, they're so important along with your doctor heads your delivery team. I mean, ultimately you guys, talking to Kelly, are responsible as the delivery team bringing babies safely into this world. You know, when I have the childbirth case, it's typically the delivery team's care, you know, that's at issue, and it's analyzed more than any other aspect of the case. But it's important to understand. Now, and I can also throw out there, I love my labor and delivery nurses. You guys are absolutely amazing humans. Most of my labor and delivery nurses, even from my cases, are amazing. And I've met very few who are not, but I have just a huge respect for labor and delivery nurses. You guys are the ones at the patient's bedside. And I can tell you in my cases, my labor and delivery nurses show more human emotion than any other witness in the case from the medical side. So you guys always blow me away. And there's always so many times where I meet with a nurse and it's like her first lawsuit. So they're always few and far between. But going back to the delivery team and care at issue, your doctor heads your delivery team, and your doctor is typically not at the hospital. It's your delivery team that's bedside with you. So just doing whatever you can, I think, even during your pregnancy, and making sure that you have a good doctor that's going to communicate with your delivery team, a good doctor that's going to communicate with you, is just so incredibly important. I have a chapter on how to pick the good doctor. So I have been analyzing OBGYNs because it's really, I say the delivery team's care at issue. The doctor is the head of the delivery team. Mm-hmm. Okay. They head it. So they're captain of the ship. So, you know, constantly in our field, we have to say, okay, is this a good doctor or a bad doctor? And we have to do it because you cannot stick a bad doctor in front of a jury. You're going to get pummeled in a courtroom. You cannot do it. So I have a whole chapter on how to pick a good one and what to look for. But yeah, a huge part of that is how your doctor talks to you, how your doctor communicates with you. because I can guarantee you how they talk to you and how much time they give you and understanding and how they communicate with you is likely how they communicate with their delivery team. So you want a doctor, Kelly, for everyone who cannot see Kelly, she is shaking her head up and down in agreement. But it's important because, again, your doctor, captain of the ship, is not at the hospital. He's relying on the labor and delivery nurses or residents or midwife to communicate how you're doing with them. And then he or she makes the recommendation. It's kind of screwy when you think of it. I mean, the lead person is not even at the hospital, but it is what it is. Mm-hmm. So it's really important you want a team that's going to have a really good synergy with your doctor. And so picking that doctor, I just cannot emphasize enough how important it is that you're comfortable and that you guys all get along on that big day. You have to be comfortable enough with your doctor to work with them, not be defensive, because that's when things go wrong. I've talked to the families over the years. It's the hardest part of my job. It's the reason I wrote the book, was to spare other families from what these poor families have endured in the birth of their baby.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. Part of the coaching program I'm doing is helping people find a provider that they align with and helping them come up with questions, because there's so little time in the visits. If you are meeting with a provider and insurance is paying for it, it's essentially you get like 15 minutes FaceTime with your doctor per visit. And it's not a lot because the doctor has a lot of things to talk about. And they have a lot of assessments to do. So if you want to get in depth on what their delivery philosophy is, that's really hard. And short of looking at their C-section rate, which I'm not even sure how to find, but people always talk about it.
Yeah, the hospital, you have to ask your doctor. They don't even tell me that stuff. Right. And so the hospital reports it because the doctors will get shit if it's too high.
Mm-hmm. So. Exactly. But it's not even the C-section rate. It's if you have a provider that's like, and it's okay if you align with this. If you want to schedule your induction, you want to get Pitocin, have your water broken, get your epidural, have a baby, great. That's fine, But if you wanted to do things a little bit more naturally and you have a provider that likes to move things along, well, you're probably not going to have the best experience. And then if there's a negative outcome, you're going to blame your provider because you felt pushed towards these interventions that you originally didn't want. And it doesn't matter if they're interventions that are for that specific purpose. If you didn't feel like you were a part of the team in coming up with that birth plan, then there's going to be some negative feelings. And if there's a negative outcome, it's all bad. So I think it's really important. The first step would be to find, like you said, find a provider that you align with and also talk to them about how they manage their births. You can interview multiple providers and multiple teams because it's not always the provider that you choose that's going to be the person that delivers you if you wanted to have a natural birth. Because if you go into labor when your provider's not available, then you're probably not going to get that provider. So you really kind of have to do your homework and talk to everybody about, will they support your preferences? And under what circumstances would then they start to recommend other interventions that you may not be comfortable with? And under what circumstances are you comfortable with them? Because going into my first birth, don't think that I had my head wrapped around the possibility that there could be a fatal outcome for me and my baby. I knew it, but it just, like you said, it won't happen to me. That happens to other people. And I never really considered that I might need a C-section to save my life or my baby's life. I knew it, but it wasn't something that I fully understood. I understood it for my second because I was a labor and delivery nurse, but also that there's other reasons that C-sections are recommended. It's not necessarily an emergency, and it is such a spectrum of reasons, and everybody's comfort level is different. So you may have a provider that pushes C-section. They feel more safe getting the baby out under certain circumstances that may not align with your preferences. You may want to try some different things before you go to the C-section. You may want a little bit more time for your delivery, for example. And I'm saying this because there are moms that I've taken care of that have that opinion. They would prefer to, as long as everybody is safe, as long as the baby looks good on the monitor, category 1 is what we consider good. We know that everything is neurologically intact. As long as mom is safe, vital signs are good, and there are no extenuating circumstances or underlying medical conditions, there are many birthing people that would prefer to continue to labor, and there may be providers that don't want to do that. And so it doesn't make anybody wrong. It just makes them wrong for each other. And so it's really, really important that you don't have that dynamic in your birth, because it's not possible to feel safe with a provider that doesn't feel safe proceeding with your wishes, because you're not going to feel safe and the provider's not going to feel safe. And that just sets up a situation for failure.
100%. So at the end of that chapter, I throw in 20 questions
I
that
love
everybody
that.
should ask their doctor. Yeah, check them out. And you know what? Those are 20 questions that we ask a doctor in every single case. So if a doctor's ever been involved in a lawsuit with me, they've been asked these questions, no matter if they're an expert or the defendant doctor, whoever it is. But we ask these questions to, again, figure out, we stick them in front of a jury, and their answers sometimes, I'll use to discredit them depending on who the doctor is. Obviously, there would not be a doctor on my side of the case. Use it to discredit them, or maybe even bolster their credibility in a case. So these are really important questions that everybody should ask. Now, I was just asked in a podcast earlier, and they were like, okay, great that you have this list of questions, but are you going to be worried about offending the doctor? And I'm like, what? No, these are not offensive questions. I mean, yeah, you're not deposing him. I may be in a situation where I'm deposing a doctor. So I'm like, an adversarial proceeding. So yeah, I may be offensive, but the patient, this should not, if a doctor is offended because you're asking them these questions, okay, red flag right there.
There's your answer.
Yeah. So that's a red flag. That doctor is probably not right for you. But and listen, here's the deal too. And I said this in other podcasts. I'm like, take my book in, throw me under the bus. Be like, I read this book from a childbirth attorney. She only sees the things that go wrong. She has the knowledge and the understanding on how to make it go right. And this is what she wants me to ask you. And I listened to a podcast with Kelly, and and Gina Mundy said, if you don't like it, email her. Yeah. So email, go on my website, ginamundy.com, says email Gina. It goes to my phone. I will have it likely in an hour or two. I will be responding to your doctor. So that's what I say, because there's a lot of things in there, because you just talked about interventions, and interventions are incredibly important. Listen, we haven't talked about this. Chapter 11 goes over the most common facts and issues in a baby case. The number one most common fact in my cases, when there's a mistake and complication and baby does not do well, is the drug Pitocin. That is a huge decision. So I've seen Pitocin inductions gone wrong since February 2003. And I've traveled the United States many times, meeting with delivery teams, going over this drug, researching this drug, cross-examining our experts on this drug. I know the drug pamphlet for Pitocin, the insert. I know that like the back of my hand. I know a lot about the drug, so I can tell you exactly how to have a safe Pitocin induction. Now, listen, doctors universally agree that Pitocin is safe during labor. What they don't agree on is how to administer it. And you had said earlier, some doctors may be more aggressive with it. Yep, those are my cases. Yeah. So that chapter, I'm a slow and steady, hit your sweet spot kind of chick with Pitocin. Yes. I love how we're on the same page, though. And it goes over that. Like, that's what you want. And it tells you why. Pitocin is a very individualized drug. How you respond to it depends on you. You're going to respond to it differently than somebody else. And if you've never had the drug, nobody can tell you how you're going to respond to it. And listen, if the pit goes too high, too fast, guess what hurts? Baby. This is not okay. If you do choose to have an elective Pitocin induction, that's your decision. That's fine. If my kids decided to have that, I would be like, great, sweeties, just read chapter 14 and talk about it with your doctor. Your doctor may look at that chapter and be like, this is great, or your doctor may not. If you're kind of nervous or, you're not, you can listen to me on the podcast. I'm a huge advocate. I'm an advocate by nature. But if you're not like me and you're like, okay, I want to have a healthy baby and a Pitocin induction, take my book in. See, like, this is what Gina said. This is how I want my Pitocin induction run. Do you have a problem with this? And if they do, or anybody does, then go to a different doctor. Because again, I'm not a medical professional who gets to see the good and the bad. I only see the bad. So that's why I wrote the book, to make sure this stuff's not happening to parents who want to have a healthy baby.
Are you pregnant and planning a hospital birth? You don't need a birth plan. You need a birth vision. In my opinion, birth plans set you up for failure. Yep, I said it. Hear me out before you turn off this podcast. You may think that by downloading a generic birth plan, it means you're in control. The truth is, it's not that simple. No one can control exactly how their birth will go. There are way too many variables. What every pregnant person wants is to walk into the hospital pregnant and to walk out with a healthy newborn in their arms. The journey in between is the murky part. It's hard to know what issues might come up that need to be addressed. If you focus your energy on a birth vision rather than giving your power to a birth plan, you can empower yourself to make the best choices for you and your baby. That's why you need to get into my Empowered Hospital Birth program. As a labor nurse and mindset coach, I can help guide you through the process of maintaining the calm autonomy that will help you achieve the birth vision you desire. In my Empowered Hospital Birth program, I will help you identify the source of anxiety you have surrounding hospital birth, fill in knowledge gaps to make sure that you are fully informed and confident, learn key phrases so you can better communicate with your medical team, emotionally process your fears so that they don't hold power over you. Go to kellyhoff.com/empowered to book a free 30-minute private birth vision call, where we will identify your top fears and must-haves and gain clarity on exactly how you want to feel in the birth space. That's kellyhoff.com/empowered. I'm honored to be a part of your birth journey. Yeah. And speaking of Pitocin, since we're talking about one of my favorite topics.
Worms.
Oh my gosh. Yeah. So at the hospitals that I work at, we have to document why we're not going up on the Pitocin.
What? Okay, start documenting this in your charts. Gina said so. The patient had a copy of Gina Mundy's book, and that's why I didn't up it.
Yeah.
Oh, and at the end you can put, and the baby was born healthy.
Right. Because like you said, when you do hit the sweet spot, the baby is born in the right amount of time and healthy. And
okay, can I just tell you something?
Yeah.
Okay, Kelly, I don't know if you've read the drug insert, just so you understand. And that drug insert, number 1, big bold letters. We do not recommend using Pitocin for 39-week inductions. Doctors do it anyway. Number 2, you only need to go up to 6 to be equivalent to spontaneous. I wish can you video this next time? Because I wish everybody could watch Kelly when I talk. It's so fun. She starts like jumping up and down with happy face, like somebody else knows what's in her brain. Okay. Kelly and I, again, are on the same page. 6 is the equivalent to spontaneous labor. There's no reason to go over 10. And just so everybody understands with the Pitocin induction, they're really easy to understand. Let's just say, it's like 1, and then you typically have an order to go to 20. So you can do 1, go up by 1, 1, 2, 3, 4. Or some doctors like to go up by 2s, 2, 4, 6, 8. So it's actually a very simple discussion that you can have with your doctor. And then just so you understand, your doctor writes the orders, and then nurses like Kelly, and Kelly's amazing at doing a good Pitocin induction. You run the induction for your patients, right? Mm-hmm. Yeah. So, and then you cannot, oh my gosh, my blood is starting to boil. It's hard. I'm like, do hospitals not understand that this is the most? My hospitals do. I jump up and down all the time about this. Mm-hmm. And I advocate for just one nurse with 1 Pitocin induction. I don't like one nurse who has 2 Pitocin inductions. That's too much. Eyes off the prize when that happens. How are you? Are you at your hospital?
We go up by 2, and then we usually have 2 Pitocin inductions per nurse. Not because we want to, but because one of the hospitals that has been actively keeping track of patient acuity and counts the acuity higher if you have a Pitocin induction. In the equation, I can't remember how, it's been a while since I've been charge nurse at that hospital, but we would have to keep track of the acuity versus the number of nurses and whether that was safe and justify our staffing. But also then we would talk about, do we need to go on diversion because we don't have safe staffing ratios and that kind of stuff. And so Pitocin was considered a 1-to-1 2-to-1 thing. So if nurses had 2 patients on Pitocin, then that started kind of messing up our staffing. The other hospital I work at, I don't know, I've not been charge nurse at, but we regularly, just because we don't ever go on diversion since we're just really a community hospital and people just come in. We labor people in the PACU. We labor people in the triage area. People come in whether we have a bed or not. It gets to be pretty crazy. But I know that the insert says that 6 is a natural spontaneous labor and that 10 you shouldn't go past it. If we've gotten to 10 of Pitocin and nothing is happening, we need to do something else. We might want to consider if it's safe to break their water and kick into natural labor and then perhaps back off of the Pitocin, because the body would pick up where the Pitocin wasn't able to, because there are natural labor hormones that are stimulated when your water breaks and when the baby's head is up against the cervix. And, your body starts to learn what to do with some of these interventions, and we don't need to be cranking the pit all the time. And I just my red flags start to go off between 6 and 10. I'm like, what's going on? What are we going to do? And then after 10, I'm like, I don't like this. I don't like this anymore.
You're going to just die when you read my book. Ready? No, I'm not kidding you. And again, this is what I'm talking about for audience. You're expecting a baby and you're choosing to have elective Pitocin induction. This is where you're going to take my book to your doctor.
Yeah.
And your doctor's not going to like this. I know that for sure. Kelly will confirm it once I say it. One of my pro tips is talk to your doctor about having a maximum dosage of 10 in their order. Doctors don't like that. They like a maximum dosage of 20.
Yes.
So you're going to tell your doctor that the maximum dosage is 10. So that nurse that way, unless you're really super lucky, you have a great nurse like Kelly, and there are a bunch of great nurses, but if you don't, you have a newer nurse who maybe isn't familiar with Pitocin inductions. A lot of my cases are newer nurses and they're not familiar with the drug and they're just literally following the doctor's orders like a robot, like they're supposed to. They don't understand yet. It takes time for a nurse to be a good labor and delivery nurse. So it's important that in my book, I'm like, nope, I'm capping out 10. And listen, if you did need more or whatever, that nurse can't give it to you without talking to your doctor. Now your doctor has to write another order. But you know what happens then at 10? Doctor and nurse have a discussion about your labor and delivery. How are you doing? It also forces them to regroup and see what's going on with your labor. So there's a million reasons why I call it magic number 10. I wouldn't go over 10. If you want to, that's fine, but have your doctor stop that order. And literally, if your doctor has not had a patient yet who's read my book and tell them that, they're probably going to go wide-eyed. Just be ready for it. And again, that's why you just tell them to email me if they got an issue.
Yeah, absolutely. I feel like every labor and delivery nurse that listens to this is going to be cheering. Because we all know that, there's other things that need to be done for, if you're at 10 a pit, probably the next steps would be, find other ways to stimulate labor. Often the next steps are break your water. But if that's not something that the patient wants to do at the time, we could talk about position changes and like moving. And there's so many things that your labor and delivery nurse can help you do, or if you have a doula that can help you do to get your labor moving. But then, like you said, what is holding the baby up if we're at Pitocin of 10 and you're not feeling the contractions and we're not adequate and all of that stuff? What's going on? Is the baby too high in your pelvis? Is there an anatomical structure that's in the way? Like, we need to maybe start considering what's going on. So yeah, it just raises a lot of questions whenever we start going past 10, at least in my brain.
No, I love it. And I loved your comment. You know so much. I just love it because after 10, your body, so you have your natural oxytocin that your body produces, and then you have the synthetic drug, Pitocin, that mimics the oxytocin. You put Pitocin into your system that activates your body to release oxytocin. So they say there's a big study that came out. It was the last thing I published in my book, that basically if you go over 10, you're on oxytocin, Pitocin overdrive. Again, that's not good for baby. But listen, you said a couple of things that I want to comment on because they are important decisions. But Chapter 11, again, goes over common issues, common facts. In a baby case, one of the most common issues in my cases, or facts, maybe I wouldn't call it an issue, but a fact, is that when there is a mistake or there's a complication, it is typically almost always after mom's water breaks. So that is actually an incredibly important decision because until that happens, your baby's chilling out, they're pretty comfy, And when you drain the water out of their home, the uterus, then it changes that environment that the baby's in, and then they become more vulnerable to something happening. So just keep that in mind, that if your doctor makes that recommendation, you want to ask them why and make sure there's a medical reason for it. And again, if your doctor's like, what's the big deal? Show them chapter 11 of my book. This is a huge decision that people don't realize unless you're in, my profession. And then another thing that you'd say, you did the community hospital, and you guys don't turn anybody down. You're making me shake. And I'm like, and again, this is chapter 11. This is so incredibly important. When mistakes and complications occur, it is also a very busy labor and delivery unit. Yeah. So everybody's running hard. They're thinned out. I mean, if you roll up to labor and delivery and they're jammed and you get stuck in an extra bedroom or an extra room, I mean, at that point, you just got to be really careful. And that's why it is, I just, so also you said a magic word that I love. I love doulas. As a childbirth attorney, I have never had a doula involved in a case. I have reviewed millions of records. A doula has never been ever even mentioned in a case. And listen, just so everyone understands, a doula would be a fact witness in a case is if she even spoke to the mom during pregnancy or childbirth, let alone step in a room. So doulas are amazing advocates, especially if you roll up and that unit is busy. I mean, you have this person, if you have a good doula, man, there's nothing that beats a good doula. I did not know much about doulas before publishing my book. And that is huge. When the childbirth attorney who only sees the bad stuff doesn't know anything about doulas. Yeah, doulas are helping to bring babies safely into this world. So if you have access to a good doula, to me, childbirth attorney, no brainer. Like my kids, I've already picked out their doulas.
Good.
I'm just saying you cannot be a good doula, and they will help you. Now, my book, chapter 7, I do have a baby advocate that could be a doula. If you don't have access to a doula, or you can't find a good one, or whatever the reason is, I do recommend designating somebody to be your advocate. Have your husband do it. Have your mom do it. Grandmas make the best advocates because I wrote the book, so I have healthy grandkids. Yeah. So grandmas, you should read my Amazon reviews from grandmas. They just love my book. That makes sense because I kind of wrote it in my grandma perspective, right?
Yeah.
But, ever since I've been doing the podcast too, a lot of people are like, well, the husbands don't really know what to do and they're just confused. And, I'm like, okay, so your husband just curls up in the corner in the fetal position during childbirth. That is not hot. Okay. No. Listen, instinctively, a husband should want to protect his wife and his baby. And I can tell you, I mean, I get it. Up until this point, I don't think there was a book that told them how to do it. My book does. My book will help guide them so they can be there for you and they can help you make those good decisions. And you know what? You are going to love him so much more if he's there protecting you and not sitting in the corner rocking back and forth.
Yes.
So, the tangent that's what the moms keep telling me, and I'm getting
passing out. Knock that off.
Man, you guys play this for your husband. Gina Mundy said that is not hot.
It's not. Oh my goodness. Yes. The ones that are at the bedside, like going through it, that's amazing. All too many of them are just like chilling, playing Candy Crush or just passed out in fetal position.
Yeah. So back to the families in these cases, when after the birth of their baby, and then they have to meet me, it's a hard day. And when I talk to them, it's even harder because they know every single thing about childbirth and what happened to their baby to the point where they know and I know. If they would have known this before their baby was born, they wouldn't be sitting there talking to me. It's absolutely heart-wrenching.
Right. And before I became a parent, I didn't know how much free time I had,
That's great.
Gina and Kelly want to remind you that now is the most time you're ever going to have in your life. So please prepare for your future because your baby is your new career. Most people don't know that going into it, but you are starting a new career and it's going to take more time than your current career. and you're going to not know how you're doing it. And I guarantee you, you don't want to deal with birth trauma or anything even worse than that, physical trauma or fatalities, because you tried to bring a baby into the world. You want to be able to get to that next chapter of your life because you have prepared fully and you understand the process. And then you've also prepared for parenting as well. But for the scope of this podcast, we're talking about preparing for your birth. I'm also advocating preparing for parenting as much as possible and picking out your pediatrician just like you're going to pick out your OB and making sure that they know their stuff and that they're going to be your advocate. All of that is so important. But like, you wouldn't prepare for a career with just going to a 3-hour class and seeing your boss 15 minutes every week. That's not how you prepare for a new career. So why would you prepare for your new career in parenting or in birthing a child and then parenting by going to a 3-hour birthing class and seeing your OB 15 minutes a week? That none of that makes sense. If we're talking about a hospital birth, you wouldn't, for instance, go in to get treatment for cancer without knowing your options and fully deciding and having empowered decisions and figuring out how the next steps of your life are going to go with this new life-altering diagnosis. Well, birth is life-altering. You're going to have a new human to care for. You've never done that before. So why are we not putting the same amount of thought and consideration into that as we would if we were going in for a life-altering medical diagnosis? And not to medicalize birth, but if someone is preparing for a home birth or for a birth center birth and they're going to see a midwife, the level of preparation that will be expected of them is so much more than what you would do to prepare for a hospital birth. And it's like you give away your power to the hospital to go ahead and just do the birthing thing. And you'd go in not knowing what you're signing up for. Whereas if you're going to prepare for a natural birth, that is a marathon that you need to physically and mentally prepare for. And people that have made that choice physically and mentally prepare for it. And they spend hours and hours and hours and hours and months doing that. And they have to demonstrate that accountability to their birth team so that they can all work together and stay safe. Why are we not doing that for hospital birth? It's a different mindset that you're turning over all the authority to the hospital or the provider or the team. And then suddenly what I see are people wanting to take back that authority because they don't feel empowered, but they don't know how because they haven't empowered themselves. So it's so frustrating to see people who have obviously not prepared have a horrible experience when it totally could have been prevented, whether or not there's a negative outcome. Because you can have a completely normal birth. And I'm an example of that. My first birth and my second birth are very similar, but my first birth caused me trauma. My second birth did not. And I had more interventions in my second birth, but they were empowered. I made those choices versus the choices were made for me in my first birth. And I look back at my chart and I agree with the choices that were made. It wasn't what I wanted, but I wasn't fully knowledgeable. And when I realized what happened with my natural labor process and all of those other things and the cascade that led to the interventions, I understand how that occurred in my second birth. And when it started to happen again, I knew what needed to happen in order to keep me and my baby safe. And so it felt empowered and my brain could keep up with what my body was doing versus my brain couldn't keep up because people were doing things to my body that I didn't understand. And that's what causes trauma.
Wow. You're like a dream come true. Thank you. You're freaking brilliant and doing all of these amazing things for your listeners. Okay, everybody realize Kelly's like busy mom, busy working labor and delivery here and has this amazing podcast. So people like you can have healthy babies. So
well, thank you. And thank you for coming out with this book because I'm like, I didn't get a chance to read it. But you know what? I was waiting for the audiobook because I'm an audiobook listener, but I'm going to buy it and bring it to the unit.
Oh, I had
just for that 6 of Pitt.
I know. You can point to it too with the doctors.
How do you sell books to nurses? You tell them that 6 of Pitt is optimal.
6 is perfect. That's all you need. Done. Yeah. It's all. So I have a labor and delivery nurse, and it was funny. I have no idea who she is. She's actually absolutely amazing. I was just going through Instagram, and she tagged me, so I think that's why it was in my newsfeed. Mm-hmm. And she's doing a review of my book. And I write down. So it was a good review. She says not only should patients read it, but everybody on the delivery team, doctors, nurse, everybody should read this book So then I wrote like, hey, thank you. That is so sweet. I really appreciate it. And so she actually messaged me personally and she was like, listen, I'm a traveling labor and delivery nurse. She goes, I take your book to every single hospital. And she goes, and I leave it at the nurses station so we can all go through it all the time. And I'm like, stop.
Mhm.
So yeah, I mean, take the book, show it to your hospital, show
Yeah.
it to your doctors.
Right.
This is why I'm not increasing the Pitocin
Mhm.
right here. And this is why I don't want to go above 10 right here.
Mhm.
Again, email me if they have an issue. And by the way,
Yeah.
the audiobook should be out March 15th. So if you do
Oh, I
want to
love
wait,
that. Yeah.
but even if you
But it
buy a
sounds
book,
like I need to like be highlighting some things. So
yeah, you can still
it's like, what
highlight
kind of book is it? Is it a workbook? It sounds more like a workbook. And like, here
it.
you go. Yes, it's going to
Yes,
be at the nurse's
yes.
station. I'll
The
be buying
inside
2
fit.
copies. And I love
Mhm,
travel nurses. They know their stuff because they have to protect themselves. Their entire
mhm.
career requires them to consistently protect their license because every hospital is just so different. And so, if you walk in and you're brand new and you only get like a couple days of training and then you're expected to be like a top-notch nurse, you have to protect your license.
Yeah. So she's doing it. And you know what?
Mhm.
I bet you, I haven't asked her. I should ask her, be like, have you had to like pull it out and show a doctor, show a hospital, like why you're not doing something of my book?
Yeah. Well, and I'd
So
heard the thing about the 6 of Pitt being the optimal level that mimics the body's spontaneous labor.
yes,
But I
the
didn't know
50.
that it came directly from the drug insert. So I need to
Yeah,
get,
it's
because we
important.
don't get the drug insert. We don't
Oh,
have
just
that.
Google
Yeah.
it and print it out.
Okay. Well, I'm going to.
It's easy. Yeah, no, you can just literally Google the Pitocin. So listen, moms, that's a great point.
There you go.
If you were gonna actually, you know what? Don't read it. I everything from the drug. You know what? Because I read it. It's kind of eye opening. You may not get an
Hmm.
elective induction if you read it. But if you
Right.
want to, you can Google it. I went to the drug insert. I pulled out everything I thought was important and then wrote it
Mhm.
more in like plain language so everybody
Yeah.
gets it.
That's probably better. Yeah. Well, I'm going to be printing it off, but because this is an argument, I mean, this is what goes around and around with the nurses because we're like, why are we pushing this? Like, why are we going faster? Why? Because one of the hospitals I work at, it says like 20 to 30 minutes is how often we go up on the Pitocin. So there's a little bit of
Oh,
leeway. The other one is 15.
stop it.
Yeah.
No. You know what? I may start just heading straight to these hospitals. That's
Mhm.
great. Audience, pure insanity. That's
Mhm.
pure insanity. There, and I have it in there. Again, this is where this I bet you this is why that verse takes my book everywhere. So your body, it can take, I hate to quote it because it's not 15 minutes. Your body has to take time to react to that Pitocin and kind of hit that steady state of Pitocin, is I think is what they call it. It's
Mhm.
way more than 15 minutes. It's like an hour or something.
Mhm.
I don't know. I quote the study. I cite the study because I did and there's a few studies that have been kind of all over the board. So I think I cited a couple of the studies, but no, like 15 minutes is not enough time. Again,
Mhm.
that's going to take your body into oxytocin, Pitocin overdrive. And that is just really, really bad for baby, as I've seen in my cases for 21 years.
Mhm. Well, and to kind of get off on a little bit of a tangent, there's some other reasons that it's not great to be pumping somebody full of Pitocin. One is we know that it increases their risk for hemorrhage afterwards because it tires
Mhm.
out the uterus. I've heard a lot of comments about it overloading the Pitocin sensors, but I haven't been able to find evidence of that. But what we want is uterine tetany after delivery. But what happens is if you are giving too much Pitocin, it causes uterine atony because you can't throw more Pitocin at a tired out uterus that's already got its Pitocin sensors full. And so then it causes problems. Then we have to do more interventions like the medications like Methergin, Hemabate, misoprostol. We use tranexamic acid now just to continue to clot what's already clotted. And then we have the potential of needing a blood transfusion or going back to the OR for a DNC or a hysterectomy, or if you're lucky, you're at a hospital, well, they do uterine artery embolism. Now we have things like the Jada that help stop the hemorrhages, and that's stopping things a lot faster, but they're expensive, they're invasive, and let's just not get there.
Yeah.
Why? When we could just be doing optimal levels of Pitocin and then asking what next in that situation. And then the other thing is that I've heard when I've interviewed midwives for my podcast before, they've talked about the endogenous Pitocin and what it does to the brain and the connection with the baby versus synthetic or exogenous Pitocin. So endogenous is internal Pitocin, like your natural body secreting the hormone in a response to the natural occurring labor processes, and also afterwards having that contact with your baby. There's thought and I believe studies that have started to realize that having that external Pitocin or the synthetic Pitocin can kind of mess that up. And so then we end up having issues with breastfeeding and bonding and all of that stuff because it doesn't necessarily affect the brain in the same way that the internal or endogenous Pitocin does. So it's a drug, just like every other drug. There's benefits and there's drawbacks. And so why are we overdosing? You wouldn't give somebody a maximum dose of Tylenol for a little bitty headache. So then why would we do the same thing for an induction if we just waited to see how the patient responded? So I just don't really know why we're cranking things as much as we are forcing things.
Yeah. After I published the book and then I've been on podcasts talking to a lot of people about my book, I keep hearing about these postpartum issues then with breastfeeding, Pitocin being. I don't know anything about that, but I'll just let your audience know. I mean, I keep hearing this a lot. Like people keep asking me about it. I'm going to look more into it, but it's then just making informed decisions. And I think something that's important we haven't talked about, we keep talking about interventions, and something that is so incredibly important is spontaneous vaginal birth is rarely in my cases.
Yeah.
So if you can do that, I am a spontaneous vaginal birth kind of chick because of what I've seen. Rarely do I have a case. Again, for the past 21 years, I hate to keep saying that, but I've been around a long time doing this, that involves a spontaneous vaginal birth. So that's a great option. As a childbirth attorney, definitely I would be telling my kids that is number one. That is what I prefer for my grandkids. Obviously, if you have to have Pitocin, you go to chapter 14. But those interventions, man, that's where stuff goes wrong.
Yeah. It's not by leaving the body alone, usually.
Yeah.
I mean, unless you have a medical reason, like if you're preeclamptic and your blood pressure's sky high, well, we don't have a choice. So there's a lot going on there. But I think for the most part, what we're talking about is elective inductions that go wrong. And then the other ones that are medically necessary because we're trying to save the mom and the baby's life. You know, it is a little bit more important to move things along, especially if we're talking about high blood pressure.
Well, and that's why it is so important if you're pregnant that you do learn about Pitocin. You may be listening to this podcast and being like, heck no, Pitocin is not coming anywhere near my labor. Listen, that might not be the case. It's very hard to plan out childbirth pregnancy or anything. You have to be ready to pivot if you need to. I tell a story. It's the introduction to the book, but my niece, she was 38 weeks pregnant. Her mom called me, which is my sister named Kelly, by the way. I know. That's what you said, Kelly and Gina. And I'm like, that's how I grew up. We're only 15 months apart. And so we're really tight. So Sam's like my other daughter. She's having the first baby of our next generation. It's huge. She's actually the reason I stopped in my tracks and wrote a book. But she was 38 weeks pregnant and she was really sick. And I am like, they were like, should she go to an IV clinic and get an IV? Or should she go to the hospital and get an IV or get checked out? And I'm like, to the hospital. I get it. She's not feeling well, but I want baby checked out because if she was in pretty bad shape. I'm like, I need baby on a fetal monitor immediately if she is that bad. Because your baby's inside you. It's hard to tell how baby's doing. You know, it's mom, you look at mom and you're like, oh, you're in pain. You can talk. Mom communicates. You guys make a plan. It's all good. Baby's much different. So I'm like, go up, check on baby. And they did. She did. She's 38 weeks pregnant and baby was not doing well. And she was given the option, C-section or Pitocin induction. And then obviously at that point, my phone just started going crazy because of those two options. But no, she just wanted a spontaneous vaginal birth. And she was not ready for anything. She's like, what's Pitocin? I'm like, what's Pitocin? And I'm like, oh my gosh, and
Crash
I'm just
course.
Like, my case is this. Yeah. And it was a scary birth. Yeah, we actually at the end of that went about 20 minutes, not knowing if the baby was going to be okay. It played out just like my cases. It was awful. And it stopped me in my tracks. And basically, 'cause initially when my sister had called, we thought it was March 17th, 2022. I couldn't drink because then it was St. Patty's Day, right? Couldn't have my cocktail or my green beer because I was just waiting for her. So I'm like, yay, 5 o'clock, my phone rings. Perfect timing, right? Can have my cocktail. And instead it was my sister hysterically screaming on the phone. And I am like, I ran outside away from my family so they couldn't hear her because I knew. And it went from like this legal analysis of for what had happened during labor to like the human analysis. Because when I talk to the families, they always describe this transitional period. They have their before life, before their baby was born, and they have their after baby was born life. They're two separate lives. And it's that point in time where their life changes forever. And I'm like, this is how the families feel. Is this our transitional point, or is our lives going to be changed forever? And obviously we got news that baby was going to be okay, but it was that minute that stopped me in my track. It took me out of my legal head and it went into this human experience, human emotion. And I'm like, I got to start writing this stuff down.
Yeah.
I know too much.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's just, I think the most important part that you mentioned was, yes, the normal spontaneous vaginal delivery is the best. That is the best option. That's what I wish that on everybody. However, there's a moment sometimes when that gets taken off the table. And if you've continued to plan for a normal spontaneous vaginal delivery, but not considered what your backup plan is if that gets taken off the table and not gotten really comfortable with those options and understanding what your comfort level is with some of those options, like we're talking about, like the 6 a pit, and then we'll have a conversation, or the 10 a pit, and then we'll have a conversation, or let's talk about whether it's medically necessary to break my water or whether we're doing this to get the labor moving. Let's talk about the position of the baby's head in my pelvis before we break my water, because that makes a difference, because the higher up the baby is, the more likely to have a cord prolapse. Or let's talk about how far I am in labor and whether or not we think that I might end up having my water broken for too long and introduce infection risks and that kind of thing. I mean, nothing is 100% benign. So it's important to know how these tools can help you and how these tools can hurt you, because they're all just tools that your doctor is using to progress your labor. But you get a choice on how you want to utilize the tools as well. And you and your doctor should be having a conversation. It should be informed consent is really important. Shared decision making so that everybody is on the same page and feels comfortable. And while the doctor is the head of the delivery team, you also are the head of the delivery team. You are the patient, the consumer. It's your body. You have autonomy. You get to say yes or no. But in saying yes or no, please don't do it arbitrarily. Please don't make it fear-based. Please make it educated so that you know exactly what your limits are, what your desires are, what your goals are, and you've really sat with a lot of these possibilities and decided how you're going to handle them. Because that's how you enter the birth space empowered, not by hiding from them and trusting your doctor so completely that you think that they're going to make the right decision for you. Yes, you should trust your doctor, but because they've proven that they're trustworthy and because you've had conversations and you understand how they plan to react in your birth. I think it's so important. And I think that so many people, unfortunately, don't take the time to do that.
Yeah. I don't even know how to respond to that. I don't even know if I can. That is so well said. So, I wrote also, you haven't talked about this, but I did do a chapter on having a plan. Mm-hmm. My spin on it as the attorney is obviously different because, this is not your normal pregnancy, but having a plan is one of the big lessons in the cases. So you can understand decisions you may have to make. You can marinate in those decisions. And it's important that you do that in the comfort of your own home, where you can listen to great podcasts like this. I mean, I haven't listened to all your episodes, but you must be just full of information. These are decisions you may have to make. And so knowing the good, knowing the bad is so incredibly important. But you read my book, you listen to podcasts like this. Maybe you have a doula. Doulas, I love them. They're just great educators. And you have somebody, a coach or whatnot. And you just go through and you understand and you take the time. When we say create a plan, how long does your wedding take to plan, right? So take some time, plan it, get it all out. And that way you're not going to be deer in the headlights if you have to make a really big decision, because that element of surprise, it's like you cannot focus. And when you can't focus, you're going to be careful. You're not going to make great decisions. And fear is the unknown.
Mm-hmm.
How do you overcome fear? Understand something. You learn about it. You take the power of knowledge, and that will get rid of your fear. People will be like, well, isn't your book going to instill fear into people? I say, listen, fear is the unknown. I am trying to provide them with information so there is no fear. They can make those good decisions to have a healthy baby. And by the way, I did have 6 pregnant beta readers read my book before it was published. And my number one question to them was, is this book scary? All 6 pregnant beta readers, who finally have all had their babies, by the way, all had nice, healthy babies. And they were like, Gina, this is not scary at all.
Yeah.
You know, even in the book, I talk about, I talk to pregnant people all the time because of what I do. I get phone calls from labor and delivery. So I can tell you early in my career, how I talk to somebody who was expecting is completely different than how I talk to them now. I was very just matter of fact. Well, you can't really be exactly matter of fact when, you have somebody carrying a baby.
Yeah.
So I learned very quickly on how to speak to them, without getting, too scary or whatever, because what I'm trying to tell people is so incredibly important. It could literally save their babies. So I obviously talk in a way that's more preventative, proactive. And that's also because my book's not about what can go wrong. It's how to make sure it goes right.
Yeah. I've started to encourage people to have birth preferences rather than a birth plan, because I feel like it's a misnomer.
Yeah.
Because nobody can plan. You can consider your options, but you can't plan for how everything is going to go. But if this happens, then I'd like to go with this option. If this option's not available, I'd like to go with this option. You have to be able to make those decisions, and you have to know what they are before you make them. The other thing that I think is really important is to ask yourself, get really honest with how you want to feel in your birth. Because if you say that you want to feel calm and empowered and joyful, how does that happen if you feel fear, if you feel unconfident in your decision making, if you feel like you don't know how it's going to go, if you don't feel comfortable in that space, you're not going to feel calm, confident, empowered, and joyful. You're just going to be scared. So why would you go into the birth space not prepared and setting yourself up to feel those negative feelings? And then if you were in a position that is that vulnerable as you are when you are exposing your private parts to deliver a baby that is, up until the time they come out of your body, essentially part of you. And then that part of you has to live on the outside of your body. I can't think of anything else more vulnerable than that. So then if you haven't really focused on how you want to feel in that space and what steps you need to take to feel empowered and not so vulnerable, and to be able to continue to use the frontal lobe of your brain, because what happens is that part checks out when you're in labor and, all of those things are happening and you get so primal, you can't actually focus and think. You need to have thought that through before. It needs to be an instinct when you make those decisions. And the other thing that I think is so important that I actually did an episode on is stress and labor do not mix. So if you want to have that normal spontaneous vaginal delivery, you have to feel safe, period. There is no way that your body can do what it needs to do if you feel terror. If you feel like, your body is not made to run away from a tiger while you're giving birth. It doesn't work. You see animals go find a safe space to deliver, and then they'll stop what they're doing if they no longer feel safe, and they'll move to another safe space. But humans are mammals, and it works the same way. If you have a doctor that's scaring you and increasing your cortisol levels and making you feel stressed out, your body's not going to feel safe enough to put itself in that vulnerable position where you are going to deliver probably the most important human in your life. You're not going to bring that child on the outside of your body where you no longer feel like you're protecting it. Your body's not going to do that. So you have to plan to feel safe in that space. And if you haven't gone through all the options and something comes up that scares you, your body's not going to be able to do what it needs to do.
Those are such great points. That's so true.
Yeah.
And actually, just so baby lawyers typically have C-sections for that reason. because we can't unsee what we've seen. We can't unknow what we know.
Yeah.
So we typically have to have C-sections. So in 2004, when I had my first baby, my friends that were also giving birth that were baby lawyers. So back then, just so you understand, elective C-sections were still like looked down upon. So my friend was like, I talked to my doctor. I'm like, I'm just not going to be able to relax. I just want a C-section. And they're like, no, that's not a reason to have a C-section. And I really did like my doctor. He was very conservative. And he's like, Gina, you can do it. So I'm playing this mental game in my head and whatnot. And then my girlfriend's like, just tell your doctor you have herpes. She's like, back in 2004, if you had herpes, they just sectioned you. So I'm like, I don't want herpes in my medical records. I don't have herpes. She's like, well, I told my doctor I have herpes and I'm getting a C-section. And she did. She got her elective C-section at 39 weeks, whatever. Then there's me. So my doctor won't schedule it. He's like, let's just see. So I wake up April 4th, 2004. So 4/4/04 in hardcore labor with my first baby. And I was always an exhausted person because I was working hard, always run hard.
Yeah.
And so I don't know why I didn't feel the initial contractions, but I woke up and straight up wanted to push the baby out, breathing through contractions. And we went to the hospital because I was convinced I was literally gonna have the baby in the car. And I get there and just everything just started freaking me out because again, just of what I know, it's very different. But baby's heart rate dropped a couple of times. The doctor is like, okay, we'll just section you. I don't think you can have a baby, Gina, vaginally because you can't relax. And I'm like, I'm sorry. Do you know what I do? I know. It's a problem. I get it. Even after that, and actually, I have a male birth trauma attorney, and he had his wife do an elective C. Now they're more acceptable, obviously. His wife had an elective C-section. Like he couldn't handle it, even as the husband or dad. He's like, nope.
Yeah.
So you have to be comfortable. In order to do that, you cannot be stressed out and cannot be in fight or flight mode for sure.
And just to clarify, we're not recommending elective C-sections. However, if that is your choice,
we're not.
we are supporting your choice.
And it was that comment was off. Stress plus labor doesn't match. And mental psyches of baby lawyers is. But I'll tell you, so it was nice to go into labor because if you're anything like me, you look down and you're like, crap, this baby has to come out of me. And when I woke up that day in hardcore labor, I'm like, get the baby out, just get the baby out, just get the, like it was this weird feeling, it's like you're having contractions, your body responds, but mentally you want the pain to stop eventually. So you're just like, get the baby out, get the baby out. It's interesting because then I had 2 scheduled elective C-sections after that. And because I definitely could not do a vaginal birth after a C-section, just because again, me. And so I had the scheduled C-section. So I would go into the hospital, have a C-section, and it was so eerie. It was like, dun, 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 you're just like, okay, they're just going to do surgery and cut the baby out. Okay. So, it was definitely mentally, like, it was nice to go into labor because you were just like, get the baby out. It was definitely harder to, have an elective C-section mentally because you don't have those normal body cues to get the baby out. I wrote that in my book, that the mental psyche, because I do have a chapter on C-sections. And I did do the difference of the mental psyche and going into labor versus not.
Yeah. I mean, and there's benefits and drawbacks to everything. And it's so important to know where you land on all of that. And so that you knew what you want was great. And I know people that, I don't know very many, but I know people that choose an elective C-section just because that's their comfort level. Now, there's definitely risks to a C-section. It's a major abdominal surgery. You're going to use anesthesia, but that doesn't mean that you're wrong for wanting one. So just knowing where you land and where your comfort zone is really, really, really important. And that only comes from knowledge and looking for that knowledge and seeking it out and wrapping your head around it and processing and all the things you need to do to make informed decisions.
Yeah, 100%. And, my kids too, I would never tell my kids have an elective C-section. That's because of what I know. I would not ever tell them. So same thing with your audience. Like I would never tell you guys to have it. It was just me, me personally. But, again, that's just to bring that niece's story full circle, that day on the porch really stuck with me. And then the thought of not being around my kids, for the birth of my grandkids set in, because obviously how I would prepare them is completely different than how like a normal family would prepare. So that's what happened is I actually was like, for my kids, I'm like, what if I'm 1,100 miles away from them that day? That's how far I was 1,100 miles from Sam that day. I don't know if I said that. So I couldn't get up to the hospital or anything. So that's what happened. And then I'm like, once I'm writing, and then that's when I'm like, oh my goodness, I know a lot of information that is not out there that can help families have a healthy baby. And it's all stuff that's just right in line with what you're saying, Kelly. So I just absolutely love it.
Yeah. Well, Gina, is there anything else that you wanted to talk about that we didn't cover?
No, we covered a lot.
Yeah.
I don't know. Did I tell your audience that chapter 1 of my book is on my website for free?
Oh, no, I didn't know that.
No, I didn't. Did I? And I'm like, that was a little over an hour ago. So I can't remember. No, I think that is so incredibly important, that chapter, that I just keep it up there. That way, if you just want to go through the lessons, and then each lesson is a subsequent chapter. So, chapter 1, learn about labor and delivery. So then chapter 2 then is what I believe is important about labor and delivery that will give parents a good basis to help them make some good decisions during labor.
Yeah.
So go there and then you can check that out. And definitely in the subsequent chapters, that's really where here's the lesson, you can learn from it, but then the chapters will go through, okay, this is how to make sure you have a healthy baby.
Yeah. And just as a reminder, where can they find that? What's your website?
Oh, GinaMundy.com, GinaMundy.com. And these days, if you just Google it.
Yeah. I'll put it in the show notes as well.
If you Googled me 1 year ago today, like nothing popped up. Like we Google, like, who the heck is Gina Mundy? Now, you publish a book, you're out there advocating for healthy babies. Google's like, this is Gina Mundy. But then again, I guess I didn't have my website back then. But no, just being, I'm like, I think a lot of shows and podcasts and just books and out there just trying to change some stuff. That's not healthy babies. I would prefer not to have a job.
Right, exactly. Like, it'd be really lovely if we could just like retire on a beach knowing that everybody has a safe and joyful and non-traumatic delivery. That'd be great.
Yes, I'm good. Please put me out of business.
Yes,
people.
Do it.
I would be so incredibly happy if I did not have a job. So
Gina and Kelly want to retire together in Bali.
There you go, right? But I'm still a partner in a law firm, and I checked my email today, and I got records in on a new case, so it's still happening.
Yeah. Well, I hope the case slows down because the book purchasing has gone up.
I will. Trust me, I'm keeping track. The correlation. I'll tell you, and then if you go to my Amazon reviews. Like I read one on Tuesday, February 6th, 2024. You can look it up. But I woke up 3 a.m. I get up every day at 3 a.m., by the way. And I
need to talk to you about how you do that. Because
you know what? I ended up loving it. Well, I had to write the book in the middle of the night. I'm still a partner in a law firm. I'm still a mom. My husband's busy business owner. This week, my kid's like, I don't want hot lunch anymore. I'm like, we don't have any food here. It's like off to the store. We have leftovers. And
right. What do you think we're going to take? This isn't a store.
Crying. And I had to pack cold lunch. So I'm like, I can't put one more thing on my plate. But no. So I woke up at 3 a.m. on Tuesday, and there was a review from that day. So I don't know where she is, and I don't know anything about it. But she basically was like, I had a healthy baby, a perfect baby girl yesterday. So she had the baby the day before. But she went through in that review how my book helped her. And it's a pretty long review. And I actually, or you can go to @Gina Mundy on Instagram. I actually posted that review on Instagram. It has to be 3, whatever, it's a video, 3 pages. But I just cried.
Yeah.
And she's just like, everybody has to have this book. But it was, when you're out there doing it, it's amazing to read those reviews. I get a lot of dad reviews, by the way. The ones that are not in the fetal position.
Yeah.
The ones that are not.
The cool dads.
The cool dads leave me reviews. So I'm going to actually go read the dad reviews and then grandma reviews.
Yeah.
Grandma's love.
Definitely. Well, Gina, thank you so much. It has been so informative and eye-opening and enlightening. I'm really glad that we connected, and I'm really glad that my listeners got to hear what you have to say about having a safe hospital birth.
Oh, Kelly, thank you for having me. I really enjoyed today's conversation, and I just love how we're on the same page. You're out there trying to help families have a healthy baby, and you are awesome. So
thank you. Same to you. Thank you so much for tuning into my podcast. If you enjoyed what you heard, make sure you hit that subscribe button so you don't miss out on future episodes. Don't forget to share the podcast with a friend who can benefit from the valuable insights that we share here. And if you could take a moment to leave a 5-star rating and review, it would mean the world to me. If you're ready to work one-on-one with me to embark on a transformational journey towards a confident and empowered hospital birth experience, go to kellyhoff.com/empowered and enroll in my Empowered Hospital Birth Coaching Program. Together, we'll create a roadmap to a birth experience that you'll cherish forever. That's KELLYHOF.com/empowered. Let's make your birth experience extraordinary.